Welcome back to Inside the Philippines. Today's story comes from a man named Clyde. He's 52 years old. He spent 27 years carrying mail for the United States Postal Service in Port Charlotte, Florida. Same route, more or less, for the better part of 3 decades. Walked it first, drove it later. 400 mailboxes. Rain, heat, hurricane season. Never missed a day he wasn't supposed to miss. He is not a wild man. He is not a barfly. He never set foot in Angeles City. He didn't blow his money on a nightclub or a girl from a bar in Manila. If you've watched enough of these videos, you might already be building a picture of what kind of guy ends up in one of them. And I want you to put that picture down, because Clyde isn't it. Here's what makes his story different, and here's what makes it hard. Clyde is living in Dumaguete right now, today, as we speak. And by any honest measure, he's living well. A house with a mango tree, walking distance from the boulevard, food he likes, weather he likes, on about $2,000 a month. Everything the videos promised him, he actually got. The arithmetic worked. The arithmetic always worked. So this isn't a story about a man who did the math wrong. It's a story about a man who did the math right, and then never once, not for 2 entire years, sat down and added up what he'd actually spent. There's a number at the end of this story. Clyde will tell you what it is when he gets there. He'll also tell you the exact afternoon he finally worked it out, and where he was sitting, and what he was holding. And I'll tell you now, that part's going to stick with you. And there's something else. Nobody in this story is a monster. I want to say that up front, because it would be a lot easier for all of us if there was one. There isn't. There's a woman named Maravich, and there's a family, and there's a country with its own rules about what family means and what it costs. Rules Clyde walked straight into, with his eyes open and his heart wide open too, which are not the same thing. What did it cost him to be needed again? That's the question underneath this whole thing. Because that's what he wanted. Not sex, not a trophy, not a fantasy. He wanted somebody to need him. And in the Philippines, if that's what you're hungry for, you will absolutely be fed. Quick word before we start. We've been doing this a while now, and after hearing so many of these stories on this channel, we put together a guide covering what we've learned from them, the patterns, the legal stuff, the questions people wish they'd asked. It's linked in the description if you want it. That's all. Moving on. Here's Clyde's story, in his own words. I carried mail for 27 years. People hear that, and they nod and they change the subject, and I get it. It's not exciting. But I want to explain something about a mail route, because it matters to the rest of this, and if you don't understand it, you won't understand me. You learn a street, not the way a neighbor learns it. Deeper than that, you learn a street from its mailboxes. I could tell you which houses were sick, prescriptions from the mail-order pharmacy, 3, 4 times a month, then a lot of hospital billing envelopes, then the AARP stuff stops coming, and one day it's just a name with no person attached to it. I could tell you who was divorcing, lawyer's letterhead, both parties, different addresses inside a month. I could tell you who'd lost a job, because the unemployment mail comes, and so does the credit card mail. And then the credit card mail changes color. Gets aggressive. I could tell you which kids went to college and which didn't. I could tell you whose father died, because of the sympathy cards. 50, 60 envelopes in a week, all different handwriting, all going to the same door. And nobody knew I knew. That's the thing. You're a guy in a blue shirt with a bag. Your furniture. Your weather. I liked it. I want to be honest. I liked it a lot. I was the most reliable thing in 400 people's lives, and not one of them ever thought about me for longer than it took to say thanks. That suited me fine. That's not a complaint. Some men need to be seen. I never did. I just needed to be counted on, which is maybe the whole problem. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The marriage ended in '09. Nothing to tell. She wasn't a villain. I wasn't a villain. We just ran out of things to say, and neither of us had the energy to start again. Amicable. Boring. Done. She lives in Sarasota now with a fella who sells boats. We're fine. I'm not going to sit here and blame a woman I stopped loving 20 years before we signed anything. That's not the wound. That's not it at all. The kids are the wound. Ashley went to Seattle. That was 2014. Danny went to Charlotte in 2017. Port Charlotte. Charlotte. We had a joke about that, and I've now told that joke to about 9 people who did not think it was funny. Anyway, they went. That's what they're supposed to do. I want to be very clear that I'm not sitting here saying my children did something wrong. They didn't. They grew up and they left, and they built lives, and that is the entire point of the exercise. But it goes in stages, and nobody warns you about the stages. First it's phone calls, Sunday, usually. 20 minutes, half an hour. Then it's phone calls that get rescheduled. Then it's texts, which is fine. That's just how people communicate now. That's what I told myself. Then it's texts that come on birthdays and holidays. And then, and this is the part that got me, then it's not even texts. It's a thumbs up. You send a picture of the hurricane damage, and you get a thumbs up. You send a message that your knee's giving you trouble, and you get one of the little yellow faces. I'm not angry about it. I want to say that. I'm really not. I kept the guest room made up. Fresh sheets, towels folded on the end of the bed, the good pillows. I changed those sheets every couple months because they'd get that closed-up smell. 4 years. Nobody ever slept in it. When I retired, they gave me a plaque. 27 years of service, my name engraved on it, little brass eagle. There was a sheet cake in the break room. Louis from the Punta Gorda office made a speech that was mostly about Louis. It was nice. Genuinely, it was nice, and I'm not going to be snide about it. That plaque is in a box, in a storage unit off Taylor Road in Punta Gorda. It's been in that box since 2022, and it is going to stay in that box, because there is no wall. That's the thing nobody tells you. You get a plaque, and then you look around for the wall to hang it on, and there isn't one. The last real phone call I had with my son was 11 minutes long. I know it was 11 minutes because I looked at the phone after. 11 minutes, and about 9 of them were about a Toyota he was thinking of buying. Should he get the extended warranty? What did I think about the mileage? I gave him a real answer. I'd thought about it. I actually went and looked some stuff up afterward, in case he called back. He didn't call back. And I sat in that house, the house with the guest room, and I had this thought, and I've never said it out loud until right now. I think I was only ever useful. That's it. That's the whole thought. Not loved, not wanted, not enjoyed, useful. To the Postal Service, to my wife, to my kids. And I was good at it. I was outstanding at it. They gave me a plaque. But the useful part was over. So what's left? Ian came through in September of 2022. Everybody in Florida has a hurricane story, and they're all boring, so I'll keep it short. My house held. That's the thing. My house held. Roof stayed on. Windows stayed in. I lost a section of fence and a lime tree I never liked anyway. The Kaminskis across the street lost the whole back half of their roof. Blue tarp for 11 months. 11 months. And every single morning I looked out my kitchen window at that tarp snapping in the wind. And I thought about the insurance adjuster. And I thought about the guy who came around wanting 18 grand to redo my shingles as a preventative measure. And I thought, I'm 51 years old and this is my whole life now. Waiting for the next one. Watching the tarp. Something in me just quit. Not dramatically. It's not like I had some big moment. I just stopped seeing a reason. So I sold it. $212,000. Cash sale? Some couple from Michigan? They didn't even negotiate much. I want you to understand that I had never in my life had that kind of money in one place. 27 years of federal service, and my checking account had never seen 5 figures. Suddenly, there's this number sitting there, and I'd look at it on my phone like it belonged to somebody else. I rented a place off Harborview, 1 bedroom. I brought a folding chair, a TV, a mattress on the floor, and a coffee maker. That's genuinely all I had in there for about 2 months. I'd sold or given away nearly everything else. The plaque and about 6 boxes went into the storage unit, and I never opened them again. I'd retired that summer, took the early option, took the deferred pension, which means it doesn't pay me anything for a good while yet. That was the deal I made. Less money later. Freedom now. Everybody at the office said don't do it. Louis said don't do it. So there I am. 51, no job, no kids calling, a folding chair, and $212,000, and a laptop. You know what happens next because you're watching this channel. I fell into the videos. Man on a beach, man in a hammock, man standing in front of a market holding up a bag of mangoes going, guess what I paid for these? Every thumbnail is the same. Big yellow numbers, an arrow, some guy in a tank top who is 15 years older than he thinks he looks. I moved abroad, and my rent is $180. This country pays you to live there. I watched hundreds of them. I'm not exaggerating. There was a stretch in the winter of 22 where that's what I did. Coffee, videos, walk, videos, bed. Thailand looked good. Everybody says Thailand. But I sat there and I really thought about it, and I had this, okay, here's the thing about me. I have never been an easy talker. 27 years of a job where the whole point is you don't have to talk to anybody. You wave, you say, hey, you get back in the truck. That's the job. That's why I was good at the job. And I thought about being in Chiang Mai, or Da Nang, or wherever, standing in a shop trying to buy a light bulb with my hands, and I thought, I can't do that. I would never leave the apartment. I'd be a mute man in a hot country. The Philippines speaks English. That's it. That's the whole reason. Not the beaches, not the girls, not any of it. I picked the Philippines because I could ask somebody where the bathroom is. Then I found the Facebook group, Dumaguete Expats, Cost of Living. And in that group there's a guy named Ron from Ohio who posts photographs of his grocery receipts. Every week, like clockwork. Robinson's, Lee Super Plaza, the public market. He'd post the receipt, and then a comment underneath, P2, $3.40 for the week. Feeding 2. Do the math, boys. I loved Ron. I want to be honest. I loved Ron. A man posting receipts to strangers on the internet is a man with too much time and not enough people. And I knew exactly what that was. Because I was that. I got out a legal pad. Now, I've done root math on a legal pad for 27 years. Miles, hours, overtime? What a raise actually means after taxes. Whether it's worth driving to the cheaper gas. That yellow pad is how I think. So I sat at the folding chair with the TV going, and I built it out line by line. Rent, P18,000 to $25,000 for something decent. That's $320 to $450. Food, call it P15,000. Electric, and everybody in that group screams about electric, so I doubled whatever they said. motorbike, health insurance, which I padded, because I'm not stupid, visa extensions, a buffer line for things I haven't thought of, which is a line I've had on every budget I've ever made, and it has never once been big enough. $1,200 a month, maybe 14. $1,400 a month, and I had $212,000 and a pension coming eventually. I sat there and I did that arithmetic maybe 40 times over 3 months. And here's what I need you to hear, because it's the whole point of this video. That arithmetic was correct. Every single number on that pad was right. I checked it against reality later, and I was within about 6%. There was no line on the pad for what I actually spent the money on. There couldn't have been. I didn't know it existed yet. Maravich, I met in March of 2023. Not a bar. I want to say that clearly, and I'm going to say it again later, because people don't hear it the first time. Not a bar. I've never in my life been in a bar in the Philippines, except to eat. Christian Filipina. It's a dating site. It costs money. You have to fill out a real profile, and the whole design of the thing is that it's slow. You can't just swipe. You have to write. She was 39. Widowed, her husband died in 2018. Motorcycle, on the road to Bakang. Eldest of 6. She ran a little carinderia near Silliman University, one of those places with 3 tables and a rice cooker the size of a beer keg, feeding students lunch for 60 pesos. Her photos were not glamour shots. That's the first thing I noticed. One of them, she's standing in front of the carinderia, squinting into the sun, and she's not even smiling properly. It looked like a photo her sister took. We wrote for 4 months before I ever booked anything. 4 months, most days, and I could not tell you what we talked about. That's the truth. Nothing. Nothing at all. The weather. What she cooked that day. Whether Silliman students tipped, which they don't. Her nephew's report card. What the rain sounded like on her roof. And she asked me about the mail route. I want to stop there for a second. She asked me about the mail route. What time did I start? Was the truck air-conditioned? It was not. Did dogs really chase me? Did I know the people? What happened when somebody died, and mail kept coming for them? That last one. Nobody has ever asked me that. My own wife never asked me that. And I sat there in a folding chair in Port Charlotte, typing out an answer about how you hold it for 10 days, and then you endorse it and send it back. And I don't know how to say this without sounding pathetic. I was so happy. I was happy typing that. The stove broke in June. She mentioned it in passing at the end of a message about something else. The stove burner's gone. She'd been cooking on one ring. The students were complaining about the weight. And then she wrote another message right after. Sorry, forget I said that. I don't want you to think I'm telling you this for a reason. That's what got me. Right there. That second message. Because I know need. I delivered mail to need for 27 years. I know what the collections envelopes look like. And need that's embarrassed by itself. Need that apologizes. That's the real thing, isn't it? That's not a hustle. A hustle doesn't apologize. That's what I told myself, sitting right there. I remember it exactly. I booked the flight for July. Manila, then the little Cebu Pacific hop down to Dumaguete. I called Ashley to tell her. She was driving, I could hear the road. I said, I'm going to the Philippines for 3 weeks. She said, cool. Then she said she had to go. The heat hits you on the jetway, not in the terminal, on the jetway, in that little accordion tunnel, before you've even touched the ground properly. It comes up through your shoes. Dumaguete Airport is one room. You walk off the plane across the tarmac. They hand you your bag off a cart, and you're out on the road in about 4 minutes. There's a fence, and people pressed up against it, waving, and about 40 tricycles idling, and the whole thing smells like diesel and something frying. She was standing by the fence in a yellow shirt. And here's the thing I keep coming back to. The thing I've said to every expat who's asked me about this since. She was exactly the same. Same woman, same face, same everything. Slightly heavier than the photos, which, good. That's what a real person looks like at 39 after running a food business. No surprise, no bait and switch, no cousin who turns out to be a boyfriend. I want that on the record, because when I tell people this story, they always assume it started with a lie. It didn't. That's what makes it hard. The first thing that happened to me in the Philippines was that people looked at me. I know how that sounds. Bear with me. 27 years I was furniture. A guy in blue with a bag. Nobody looks at the mailman. And I walk down Purtis's Street on my second day, and there's kids yelling, "Hey, Joe!" and a woman at a sorry store leaning out over the counter to say, "Good morning, sir," and a tricycle driver who won't stop following me at 3 miles an hour asking where I'm going, and a security guard at the Robinsons who salutes me with his hand. I apologize when people bump into me. That's who I am. That's how I'm built. And I'm walking around this town being seen by everybody, all at once, all day, and I want you to know it was not pleasant at first. It was too much. I got back to the hotel that first day and just sat in the dark with the aircon on full. By day 4, I liked it. By day 10, I was going out looking for it. And the old habit didn't switch off. I'm walking their street out in Valencia, up the hill from town, where the family is, and I can't help it. I'm reading the place. That house has a new roof and no vehicle. That one's got the sorry store, so somebody's home all day. That one's got a tarp over the back, and it's been there a while. You can tell by how the plastic's gone chalky. 2 houses with basketball hoops nailed to a coconut tree. The whole street's got a rooster problem, and nobody seems to consider it a problem. 27 years of reading houses. I read every house on that street inside 2 days. I did not read the family. Maravich she was tired. That's the word. She got up at 4 to go to the market for her carinderia, and she'd be done at 9 at night, and she was tired, in a way I recognized from the office, from guys who'd been on their feet 30 years. She was funny about it, though. Dry. She had this way of looking at the world like it had personally disappointed her, and she'd decided to forgive it. But not forget. I found that comforting. A woman who thinks everything's wonderful, at my age. That's a warning. A woman who thinks most things are a bit of a racket, that I could trust. I could trust her. That's the part one still believe. Now, the money, that trip. 3 weeks. Let me lay it out, because it's small, and because the smallness is the point. Pasalubong first. You come to the Philippines, you bring gifts. This is not optional, and it is not greed. It's just how it works. You went somewhere. You thought about people while you were gone. You prove it with a bag of something. Except, I had 11 relatives to buy for, and I had no idea what any of them wanted. So I overdid it at the duty-free, and then overdid it again at the SM in Cebu on the layover. Chocolate, perfume, a Spurs jersey for a kid who turned out to be a Lakers fan. Maybe $12,000 all in. Call it $215. Nothing. Groceries. I insisted. Every time we went to Lee Super Plaza, one paid, and I paid over, and I bought things nobody asked for. That's a few $1,000 a week, and it's genuinely nothing. But I want you to notice something about it. Nobody asked me to. I invented that. I've thought about it a lot since. Who started that? I started that. The stove was P18,000. About $320. New burners, new gas line. Guy came and installed it in an afternoon. She cried when they carried it in, and then she was embarrassed about crying, and then she got mad at herself for being embarrassed. And honestly, it was the best $320 I have ever spent in my life, and I'd do it again tomorrow. And then the fiesta. Valencia has its fiesta, and I happened to be there for it, which was not an accident on her part. One don't think, though I never asked. Whole street shuts down. Every house cooks. Lechon on a spit in somebody's yard. This enormous pig, and pancit in a basin the size of a bathtub, and lumpia coming out for 6 hours straight, and San Miguel and Red Horse in ice chests, and a karaoke machine that never once stopped, not for a second, from 11 in the morning until 2 the next day. I got put at the head table. I didn't know what that meant. I thought it was just where there was a chair. It is not just where there was a chair. Her mother, Nanay, everyone called her Nanay. She sat down next to me and took my hand in both of hers. She's maybe 70, 4'10", hands like a bricklayer. And she said a prayer over me. In English. She switched to English so that I would understand it, and I want you to think about that, because everyone else at that table spoke Cebuano, and she made the whole prayer in a language for one person's benefit, and that person was me. She thanked God for sending me, and these kids kept running past the table, 5, 6 of them, cousins, nephews. I did not know a single one of their names, and every one of them said, Tito Clyde, Tito, Uncle, not Sir, not Joe, not Cano, Tito Clyde. I went to the CR, the comfort room, that's the bathroom. It was a concrete stall out the back with a bucket. And I stood in there, and I cried. I hadn't cried in 11 years. Not at my father's funeral. Not when Ashley left. 11 years, and I stood in a concrete outhouse in Valencia, Negros Oriental, with karaoke coming through the wall. Somebody murdering my way. It's always my way. And I cried for about 4 minutes, and then I washed my face, and I went back out and ate lechon and told nobody. I have never told anybody until right now, because I was in. I was 52 years old, and I was in something. That's what I thought the head table meant. Love, acceptance, family. Here's what I know now. The head table is real. The prayer was real. Nanay meant every word of it. But the head table is also a position, and positions have duties. You don't get seated at the head of a Filipino family for free. You get seated there because you are somebody. And if you're a Cano with a house sale in your bank account, everybody at that table knows exactly what kind of somebody you are, whether they'd ever say it out loud or not. Which they wouldn't. Nobody would ever say it out loud. Utang na loob. Debt of the inside. It's usually explained to foreigners as this thing where they owe you, you did something kind, so now there's a debt. And that's true. But nobody explains that it runs the other way too. They took me in. They fed me. They prayed for me. They gave me a name and a chair. What do I owe for that? Nobody ever tells you the number. There isn't a number. That's the whole design. I flew home on a Tuesday. The apartment off Harbor View. Folding chair, TV, mattress, same as it was. But it was quiet, in a way it had never been quiet before, and I sat down in that chair and I could still hear the karaoke, and I could still hear those kids, and I thought, this is a storage unit with a bed in it. At the airport, before I went through, Maravich held onto my arm and she said, "Don't send money." She said it twice. She said, "We were fine before. We are fine now. I don't want that between us." And I've turned that over about 1,000 times. Was it real? Was it a move? I think it was real. I genuinely do. It also doesn't matter even slightly, because I sent it anyway. I booked the second trip within a week. The first transfer went out on the 3rd of August, 2023. 2 weeks after I got home. 15,000 pesos. About $265. And I want to be precise about how that happened, because this is the part people get wrong when they hear these stories. They imagine a woman on a video call with wet eyes asking for money. That is not what happened. What happened is, I brought it up. Me. On a messenger call, sitting in my folding chair in Port Charlotte at 11 at night, which was lunchtime for her, and she was in the Carinderia with the fan going, and I could hear a student ordering something in the background. I said, I want to help with the business. Just monthly, just a little, so you're not always one bad week away from it. She said no. I asked again a couple days later, and she said no again. And she got a little short with me about it. And she said the thing she'd said at the airport. I don't want that between us. Third time, I didn't ask. I just sent it and told her afterward. She was quiet for about a day, and then she said thank you. And she said, God will bless you for this. And that was that. It never came up again. It went out on the 3rd of every month for the next 2 years, like a mortgage payment. Now, I've had a lot of time to think about whether the 2 refusals were real. Here's where I land. I think they were completely real. I think she meant it. She's the eldest of 6. She'd been carrying that family since she was 19, and she had exactly enough pride left to want one single thing in her life that wasn't about money. And I ran that pride over with a car, because I needed to give. That's the thing nobody says in these videos. Sometimes the foreigner is the one who starts it. Sometimes she says no, and he keeps pushing, because being needed is the whole reason he came. It doesn't matter whether the refusal was real, is my point. Because once the number exists, the number never goes back down. 15,000 a month became the floor. It was never once the ceiling. I went back in September for a month. Went back in October. In November, I gave up the place off Harborview, sold the folding chair for $6, and flew to Dumaguete on a tourist visa. You can stretch a tourist visa out for years here if you keep extending. You go to the Bureau of Immigration office, you take a number, you sit there for 2 hours under a ceiling fan, looking at a poster about human trafficking, you pay your fee, you get your stamp. It's a hassle, and it's not cheap over time, but it works. And I want to say plainly, I never had a visa problem. Not once. That's not this story. I rented a house on the edge of town for $18,000 a month, about $320. Concrete, 2 bedrooms, tile floors, a mango tree in the yard that dropped fruit on the roof at night and scared the hell out of me the first week. Roosters at 4, church bells at 5:30, karaoke from a neighbor most nights, and I liked it, honest to God, even the guy who kept doing Careless Whisper in a key that does not exist. And here it is. Here's the number the whole video's named after. Rent, $18,000. Electric. And this is the one that gets people. Because if you run aircon at night, it's $4,000 to $6,000. Food. I eat well. Fish from the market, a lot of grilled chicken from the place near the boulevard, 150 pesos for lunch. Motorbike, P65,000 secondhand, gas is nothing. Health insurance, which I paid out of pocket, and don't skimp on that. Visa runs. Somewhere between $1,300 and $1,500 a month. All in. Living better than I ever lived in Florida. That is true. That was true then, and it is true right now, today. And if you take nothing else from this video, take that. The cost of living videos are not lying to you. There's just no line in that budget for the family. Mornings, I'd go to the boulevard. There's a spot where the expats do breakfast. The same 8 or 9 guys, tapsilog and instant coffee, complaining about the electric company and their ex-wives. That's where I finally met Ron, the grocery receipt guy. He looked exactly like a man who posts grocery receipts. 60-something, Ohio, permanently annoyed. I'll come back to Ron, the escalation, and I want to lay this out in order, because it's the order that matters. March 2024. Nanai's gallbladder. She'd been sick for weeks. They finally took her into Silliman Medical Center, and it's an actual emergency. I saw her. She was gray, P95,000 by the time they were done. About $1,700. I paid it before anyone asked. Before. I want that on record, too. And they were so grateful it was almost hard to be around. Nanai held my hand again and prayed over me again, and Maravich's sister cried, and Ray shook my hand for about a full minute. That's an actual medical emergency, and I would pay it again today. There is nothing wrong with that money. I have zero regret about that 95,000 pesos. May 2024. Jomar, Maravich's nephew. Smart kid, 17, wanted to do engineering at Foundation University. First person in that entire family to go to university. P62,000 for the year. About $100. You tell me. You tell me you'd say no to that. You sit at a table, and a 17-year-old kid who calls you Tito shows you his grades, and his mother won't look up from her plate because she's ashamed she can't pay. And you tell me you say no. For $1,100. I said yes in about 2 seconds, and I felt like a king for a week. July 2024. Ray needed a tricycle. Not wanted, needed. That was the framing. He'd been driving somebody else's and giving up most of the fare. His own unit, he could earn properly. He could stop asking. $120,000, about $2,150. That one I thought about for 3 days. That's the one where I remember hesitating. And then I did it anyway, because the pitch was that it would reduce the asking. It did not reduce the asking. And then underneath all of that, the bleed. That's the only word for it. Fiestas, and there is always a fiesta. A baptism where I got asked to be a godfather. And if you don't know what that means here, it means you're on the hook for that child's education, forever. And everybody knows it except you. A funeral for a cousin I'd met twice. Balikbayan type stuff. I wasn't overseas anymore, but the expectation just transferred. School shoes, a birthday, a phone, a roof. Gcash, Gcash, Gcash. Ping. 2,000 pesos here, 5,000 there, 15,000 for something with a hospital in it. And I stopped reading them. That's the honest truth. I got to where I'd just approve them like I was clicking through a terms and conditions page. That's the mechanism. That's how it actually works. Not one big con, 1,000 tiny approvals. Over that year, on top of the P15,000 monthly, it came to somewhere around $410,000, $7,200, which, hold on, $7,000 in a year. That's nothing. That's a used car. I could absorb that forever. I know what you're thinking. It's the shape, not the size. I didn't see the shape. Ron saw the shape. One morning at the breakfast place, he waited till the others cleared out, and he said one sentence to me. He said, "You're paying the family tax, Clyde, and there's no ceiling on it." That's it. That's all he said. He didn't lecture me. He just said it, and went back to his coffee. And I thought, this man is bitter. This man is divorced twice, hates his neighbors, posts receipts to strangers, and has no one. Of course he thinks that. He's a miserable son of a bitch, and he wants everyone else to be miserable too. Both things were true. He was a miserable son of a bitch. He was also completely right. That's why nobody listens to warnings, by the way. The warnings always come from the guy you don't want to be. Here's the last thing about that year, and then I'll get to the house. I was happy. I need you to understand that. Not happy on the surface while something rotted underneath. Happy. Actually happy. I had a kid calling me Tito, and a woman who made me sinigang when I had a cold, and a family that phoned me when something broke. For 27 years I was necessary and nobody looked up. Then for 4 years I was nothing to anyone. And then I was necessary again. And this time everybody looked up. It's like getting off a drug and then getting back on it. It's not that you don't know what it is. You know exactly what it is. You just decide you'd rather have it. It came up at a Sunday lunch in September of 2024. Nobody made a speech about it. It came up the way everything came up here, like somebody solving a problem for me. We're eating at Nane's place, and it's a whole thing, 12 or 14 people, kids on the floor, adobo and rice and a bowl of sinigang with a fan blowing over the top of it, and the TV on loud in the corner with nobody watching. And Ray says, offhand, Tito, how much do you pay for rent? 18,000. And there's this little intake of breath around the table. 18,000 a month. Gone. Forever. To a landlord in town. 216,000 pesos a year. Into a hole. Then Nane puts down her spoon and says, in front of everybody, why don't you build on our lot? The lot up the road. 2,000 square meters, or something like it. Coconut, banana, some scrub, and a concrete slab where somebody had started something in about 1998 and stopped. I'd walked past it 100 times, and the whole table lights up. It's just sitting there. It's family land. It's doing nothing. Build a house, Tito. I want to be very careful about the next part. One knew the law. I want that stated flat out because people hear these stories and they think the guy was ignorant. I was not ignorant. I had read it. It's on the first page of every website about the Philippines. Foreigners cannot own land. Full stop. You can own the house, the structure. You can even lease the land for 50 years. But the dirt is never yours, and it never will be. Ron had told me, straight out, over Tapsilog. He said, don't build on family land, Clyde. I've watched 3 guys do it, and I paid a lawyer. That's the part that kills me. I paid an actual attorney in Dumaguete $5,000 for a consultation, sat in his office with the aircon dripping into a bucket, and he told me exactly the same thing. He said, sir, the improvements will belong to whoever owns the land. He said, if you want to protect yourself, do a long-term lease, registered, notarized, annotated on the title. He said, get the title. Look at the title. I said, okay. I meant it when I said it. Here's what I did instead. I went back to that table, and I said, very carefully, that I'd want something in writing, some kind of lease, just paperwork, just so it's clean. And nobody got angry. Nobody. That's what I want you to understand. There was no fight. They just got hurt. Quietly. Nane looked at the table. Maravic's sister said, of course, Tito, whatever you want. And Ray said the thing that ended it. He said, Tito, we are not those people. This is family land. You are family. It is the same thing. And I sat there, and I made a decision. I've had a lot of time to look at the decision since, and I can describe it exactly. I decided that the law was for other men. That's it. That's the whole move. Those warnings, that lawyer, Ron, and his 3 guys, that's for the fella who met a girl in a bar in Angeles and put a condo in her name after 6 weeks. That's for the mark. That's for the sucker. I was not a sucker. I had been prayed over. I had been called Tito by children. I'd paid for a gallbladder and a boy's tuition. I was inside. Rules are for people on the outside. If you are watching this, and you are about to do something with a large amount of money in a foreign country, I want you to sit with that sentence for a minute. Rules are for people on the outside, because I promise you, whatever you're planning, you have already told yourself some version of it. We broke ground in November. The contractor was Ray's cousin. Of course he was. And honestly, he did decent work. The house is standing. It's a good house. That's not sarcasm. The quote was P2.2 million, about $39,000. It finished at $12.9 million, about $51,000, 30% over, which anybody who has ever built anything anywhere on Earth will tell you is roughly normal, and I'm not even sure I was cheated. Cement went up. The steel went up. There was a thing with the septic that added $80,000, and a thing with the road access that added $140,000, and every single time it was explained to me with apologies, and I paid it inside a day. I never argued once, not one time. 27 years of federal employment, and I'd argue with a supervisor over a 15-minute break, but I never once questioned a peso on that build. 3 bedrooms, tile throughout. Real windows, screens, a proper concrete water tank on a tower because the barangay water goes off. A kitchen Maravich designed herself and cried about, actually cried, standing in the middle of it with the tiles still stacked in the corner. Then the truck. The family needed a vehicle. The carinderia was growing. We'd expanded it by then, another few tables, and she was doing catering for the university, and everything was moving in the back of a borrowed multicab. $620,000, about $11,000, second-hand Hilux, decent one, and a bed, and a fridge, and a gas range, and a sofa, and a washing machine, and curtains, and a fan for every room. Call it another $200,000. Somewhere around $3.5 million all in. 62,000 American dollars. And I want to tell you the next part properly, because if I skip it, I'm being dishonest. We moved in on the 11th of April, 2025. And it was good. It was so good. It was the best 8 weeks of my entire adult life, and I will not have anybody take that away from me. I'd get up at 5:30 with the church bells and the roosters, and I'd make coffee in my own kitchen and stand out on my own porch and look at the mountain. And there'd be smoke coming off somebody's yard. And by 7, the kids were coming through on their way to school, and every single one of them said, "Good morning, Tito Clyde." Jomar came and did his homework at my table, because the Wi-Fi was better. Nanay came up most afternoons and sat on the porch and didn't say anything, and didn't need to. I had a house. I had a family. I had a name that people said out loud. 8 weeks. Then it starts, and it starts so small you'd have to be looking for it. June. A man walks the property line. I'm on the porch, and there's a guy in a polo shirt, 50s, and he's walking the boundary of the lot with his phone up, taking photographs. Slow, careful, doing the corners. I raised my hand at him. He raised his hand back and kept going. And I said to Maravich, "Who's that?" And she looked out, and she said, "Surveyor, maybe, for the road." Okay, Ray and the truck. I needed to move something, and the truck was gone, and it was always gone. And I said to him, just as a joke, I said, "Ray, whose truck is it anyway?" And he laughed. And then he didn't answer. Took me 2 more weeks to get it out of him. It was registered in his name. Not just registered. It had never been in any other name. There was never a moment where it was mine. And when I finally asked him straight, he was completely baffled that I'd ask. He said, "But Tito, you gave it to the family." He wasn't lying. In his head, he was right. Then Maravich started taking calls outside. Not secret, not sneaking. She'd just get up, and she'd take the phone into the yard, and she'd stand under the mango tree with her back to the house, and it was always Cebu. her cousin in Cebu. Something about her cousin in Cebu. And Nane stopped looking at me. That one I noticed. That one I actually noticed. And then I put it down. Because here's the thing that I think about more than any of it. For 27 years I read houses. I could tell you who was dying on my route from the mail. That was my one gift. That was the single thing I was good at in this life. And I sat on that porch for 6 weeks, with a surveyor walking my boundary, and a truck that wasn't mine, and a woman taking calls in the yard. And I read none of it. Not a thing. Not because I couldn't. Because it was the first time in my entire life that I didn't want to know. I had about $70,000 left of the 212. And a house I did not own, on land that was not mine, in a country where it never could be. The fish pond was Ray's idea, and it was not, as far as I could tell, a bad one. There's a piece of low ground down past the coconuts, wet most of the year, useless for anything. Tilapia. You dig it out, you line it, you stock it, you sell to the market and to the carinderia. Nanay's brother-in-law knew a guy in Baez who'd done it. I want to be clear that nobody had asked me for a single peso toward that fish pond. Not one. That's not what this is. The argument started at a Sunday lunch in July of 2025, and it started over something small. Who had put in money for the survey, or the pipe, or something about the pipe. And then it went up like a gas fire. I've never seen anything like it. Filipinos are not confrontational people. Saving face is the whole architecture of the culture. 2 years I lived there, and I never once heard a raised voice at that table. Everything gets handled sideways, quietly, through cousins. And then this. 20 minutes, 30. Everybody standing, Nane screaming, Ray screaming, the sister crying, kids taken out to the yard, all of it in Cebuano. I speak zero Cebuano. 2 years. I learned salamat and maayong buntag, and that's it. And that is entirely my fault, and I'll come back to that. So I'm sitting in a plastic monoblock chair on the porch of the house I paid for. 200,000 pesos of tile under my feet. And they are screaming past me. Not at me. Around me. Like I'm a post. And I remember thinking, this is oddly familiar. And then I placed it. It's the mail route. It's being furniture. Then Nane's brother-in-law comes out onto the porch. Boyet. Big man, drinks Red Horse, generally cheerful, we'd shaken hands maybe 50 times. He's got a bottle in his hand and he's shaking, and he's got that look. Not sly, not cruel. Ashamed. He was ashamed, and he was furious. And I've thought about this for a year now, and I believe those two things came out of him at the same time, and one of them opened the door for the other. He looks at me, and he says it in English, so I'll understand. He goes, Tito, do you even know whose land you are sitting on? And I said, this is Nane's lot. And he laughed. Not mean. Just done. He told me the lot belongs to an uncle. Nane's brother. Lives in Cebu. Has for 30 years. It's his name on the title, it has always been his name on the title, and he has been negotiating to sell that parcel for about 18 months to somebody who wants to put up a subdivision. 18 months. I broke ground in November of 2024. He said, and this is close to word for word, I wrote it down that night, he said, you built a house on a man's land, and he is selling it, and everybody here knows. And nobody will tell you, because nobody wants to be the one. Then he went and sat under the mango tree, and didn't say anything else. That's the whole revelation. That's it. That's how I found out. Not a phone, not a private investigator. not a woman confessing at 2 in the morning. A drunk man with a guilty conscience in the middle of somebody else's fight about a fish pond. I went inside. I went into the bedroom, and I closed the door. And I sat on the edge of the bed for a while. And then I got out the legal pad. The same pad. I want you to understand that. The same yellow legal pad I sat with in that folding chair in Port Charlotte in the winter of '22, working out whether I could afford this life. It had come with me in the suitcase. It was in the drawer under my passport. And I started adding, Gcash history goes back forever. Every ping, every 2,000 pesos, every 5, every Tito can you help Lang. My bank transfers. Wise, the tranches to the contractor, all of it dated. The hospital, the tuition, twice, because it was 2 years by then. The tricycle, the truck, the stove, the fiestas, the godchild. It took me most of the night, and I did it in columns like a root sheet, and I checked it twice because I don't trust myself with arithmetic when I'm tired. And I got the same number both times. $141,000. I don't have any drama for you about that moment. I want to be honest. There was no shouting, and no throwing anything, and no crying. I looked at the number, and it just did not seem like it could be describing me. It seemed like a number about some other man. 2 years earlier, I had $212,000, and I was frightened to spend 40 on a lawn chair. And here's the part that actually got me. It wasn't the total. It was that I had never once added it up. 27 years of root math. 27 years of a man who calculates whether it's worth driving 4 miles for cheaper gas. And I did not add it up. Not one single time in 2 years. And I did not add it up on purpose. I sat with it for 4 days. 4 days of good morning. 4 days of coffee on the porch. 4 days of Jomar doing his homework at my table. I didn't say a word. I just watched. Ran the route. Then, on the Thursday, I told Maravich what Boye had said. She cried. Immediately, hard, real crying. The kind you can't do on command. And I've heard every argument about how that's exactly what a good one would do. And I've thought about all of them. She said she didn't know. She said her mother had always told her the lot was theirs, that it had been settled years ago, that the uncle didn't want it. And I sat across from her at my own kitchen table, and I watched her face. 27 years. 400 houses. I could tell you who was getting divorced from an envelope. That was my one talent on this earth. I looked at that woman for a full minute, and I got nothing. Nothing at all. Blank. Like reading a language I don't have. And that's when I understood that the thing I was good at only ever worked on strangers. Do I think she knew? I think, okay, here's where I've landed. And it took me a long time. I don't think she was told. I think she chose not to ask. I think she did with that title exactly what I did with the Gcash history, which is not look at it, because looking at it would have ended something she wanted. She loved me. I believe that. I'm not being sentimental. I've turned it over 1,000 times, and I believe it. And she never once corrected a single thing I assumed. Not once. In 2 years. Both of those are true. They sit right next to each other, and they don't cancel out. That is the hardest sentence I have ever had to say out loud, and it took me about 6 months before I could say it without my voice going. I went to the lawyer in September. Different lawyer, better one, P15,000 this time, and I brought everything. He was very kind about it, which somehow made it worse. No lease, no annotation, no contract, nothing in writing anywhere with my name on it except a stack of bank transfers, which prove I paid for a house, and prove nothing at all about who owns it. Under Philippine law, the improvement follows the land. The uncle owns the lot. The uncle owns the house. He could pay me for it if he felt like it. And there's a whole doctrine about builders in good faith. And my lawyer said, carefully, "Sir, the court's here." And then he stopped and just looked at me. 2.9 million pesos, $51,000, 3 bedrooms, tile throughout, water tank on a tower, a kitchen she cried in. 6 months I lived in it. There is no version of this where the house is not gone. I've looked for one. There isn't one. I didn't sue. People ask me that first, every time, and they get annoyed with the answer. 3 reasons. 1, I had no standing. My name is on nothing. There's no lease, no contract, no title, no annotation. I'm a tourist who gave money to a family, and that is not a legal category. That's just a thing that happened. My lawyer laid out what a builder in good faith claim would look like, and then he told me honestly what it would cost and how long it would take, and what my odds were against a family that has lived in that barangay for 4 generations. 2, the case would cost more than it recovered. Simple as that. Years of it. Money going out the door to chase money that already went out the door. And 3, and this is the real one. Dumaguete is a small town. If I sue that family, I can't walk down Purtis's street. I can't sit at the boulevard. Everybody would know, and everybody would take a side, and I'd become the Kano who took a Filipino family to court. I'd be that guy for the rest of my life, in the only place I have left. I moved out in October of 2025, took 4 boxes and my motorbike, and left the water tank and the furniture and the kitchen she cried in. So, the damage. I'll just say it plain, because that's what you came for. $141,000 spent. About $68,000 left, which is not nothing. I want to be honest about that, because if I sit here and act destitute, 1,000 lying to you, $68,000 and a federal pension that finally started paying, and Social Security waiting for me down the road. I am not on the street. There are men in this town in far worse shape who did far less. A house, P2.9 million, $51,000, that I lived in for 6 months and will never own. It's still standing up there. Somebody's living in it. I don't know who. 2 years. And dignity. That one's specific. It's not the money. It's the seating chart. Being the man at the head of the table who is the last person at the table to know. There were 14 people in that house who knew about the uncle, and not one of them said a word to me. And every single one of them had a reason not to. And every one of those reasons made sense to them. And the kids. I never told Ashley. I never told Danny. Not out of shame. Out of, what's the point? What exactly would happen? I'd send that message, and I'd get a thumbs up, and then I'd have to live with having received a thumbs up about the worst 2 years of my life. That's the part that got me the hardest, and I've only recently been able to say it. I lost $141,000 on the other side of the world, and it did not register back home. Nothing about me registers back home. That's not their fault. It's just true. So, where am I now? I rent a place in Dumaguete, pay $18,000 a month, about $320, 2 rooms, walking distance to the boulevard. There's a Mercury Drug on the corner, and a carinderia where I eat lunch most days, not hers, a different one. Roosters at 4. Karaoke on Saturdays. And I want to say this to whoever put the title on this video, and to every man watching who found this channel the same way I found those channels. I live well on $2,000 a month. That is true. It was true then, it's true today. I eat fresh fish. I ride to Valencia on the weekend for the cold air. I get a massage for 400 pesos. My electric bill is my biggest complaint. I have a doctor I like. The arithmetic was never the lie. The arithmetic was right on the first try, on a yellow pad, in a folding chair in Florida. There's just no line on the pad for the family. There never is. And that's not a scam either. It's just a category of expense that doesn't exist in an American budget and does exist here, and nobody puts it in the video because it doesn't fit in the thumbnail. I still see Maravich. I know how that lands. I don't have a word for it. Not married, never were, not partners, not quite over either. She comes by. We eat. Sometimes we don't talk about any of it, and it's easy. And sometimes we do, and it isn't. And I still help. Sometimes. Jomar's in his last year and I'm paying for it, and I'd fight anybody who told me not to. But I decide now. Me. In advance. On paper. With a number. And I say no. I've gotten good at it, which is not something I ever expected to say about myself. The first time I said no, some cousin, some emergency, $30,000. Nothing happened. Nobody yelled. Nobody cried. The temperature just dropped about 2 degrees and stayed there. I don't sit at the head table anymore. I'm not invited to much. Nobody's rude to me, and nobody's warm to me. The kids don't say Tito Clyde, they say sir. That's the price of no. I want you to know that before you go around telling men to set boundaries like it's free. It isn't free. It cost me the exact thing I came here for. I'm trying to learn to be okay with that. I'm not there. I'll tell you, honestly, I'm not there. Here's the last thing. 27 years, I read houses. I could tell you who was sick, who was leaving, who had died, from a stack of envelopes. And none of them ever knew I was doing it. I was the guy who saw and never got seen. That was my whole life. I thought it was a skill. It wasn't a skill. It was a hiding place. I came here, and for the first time in my life, somebody read me. And it turned out I was easy. God, I was easy. A man with no wall for his plaque, and a guest room nobody slept in, and $212,000. You wouldn't even need to be clever. I don't think anybody sat down and planned it. That's what I keep saying, and people keep not believing me. I don't think there was a plan. I think there was a family with real needs and real love, and a man who wanted to be needed so badly he'd have paid twice as much, and nobody in the whole arrangement had any reason on earth to stop it. So here's what I'd tell you. In the Philippines, love and obligation come in the same envelope. Nobody's lying to you. They're just not going to tell you what's inside. And if you're a man who needs to be needed, you will never once open it and check. 4 things, then I'm done. Separate the love from the ledger. Look at the ledger every single month. Not because she's a thief, because you are not going to look otherwise. Put a number on the year before the year starts. Say it out loud to somebody. This year the family gets X. When X is gone, it's gone. Family land is a sentence with no legal meaning. None. 0. Get the title, read the name, or don't build. And if you can't say no to the 3rd request, you were never going to say no to the 10th. Practice on the small ones. That's what they're for. That's it. That's what $141,000 buys you. That was Clyde. And I want to sit with something before we close this out, because I think it's the whole point of the story, and it's the thing people are going to argue about in the comments. There is no villain here. There's no bar girl, no fake profile, no boyfriend in the background, no syndicate. Maravich was exactly who she said she was. Nane's prayer at that fiesta was real. The gallbladder was real. The gratitude was real. Even Boyette, the man who broke the whole thing open, did it out of shame, not malice. What happened to Clyde is that a Filipino family included him. And inclusion in a Filipino family is not a symbolic gesture. It is not a warm feeling. It is a working relationship with real, running, lifelong obligations flowing in every direction. And everybody born into it understands the terms because they've been paying them since they were children. Clyde accepted the seat and never asked what it cost. Because he was starving, and you don't read the fine print when you're starving. Here's the trap, stated as plainly as we can state it. Utang na loob is a functioning system of mutual care. It works. It has held that country together through poverty that most of our viewers cannot imagine. But a Western man who walks into it holding a $200,000 house sale does not walk in as an equal. He walks in as a resource. Not because anyone is cruel, because that is simply what he is, and everyone can see it. And he is the only person in the room who can't. And to the viewer who found this video the way Clyde found his, sitting somewhere quiet, doing the math on a piece of paper, $1,200 a month, maybe 14, the math is right. That's the thing. The math has always been right. It just doesn't have a line on it for what you actually came for. Stories like Clyde's are why we put our guide together. Everything we've learned from the men who've told us what went wrong, the patterns, the things they wish somebody had said to them before the first transfer. It's in the description, if it's something you need. If this one landed, leave a comment. Tell us what you'd have done differently at that Sunday lunch. And if you've got a story of your own, we read every message. We're not here to talk you out of the Philippines. We're here to make sure you arrive with your eyes open. Until next time, this has been Inside the Philippines.